Hi, my name is Steve Copeland and welcome to the second video in the Nephilim series entitled Nephilim, the Biblical Evidence. In the first video on this Nephilim series, I wanted to show how Scripture explains exactly how the procreation of angels and women occurred. In this video, we're going to examine the biblical evidence for the Nephilim, which is fundamentally speaking about the existence of giants. But first, a few definitions. In the Septuagint Greek, the LXX version of the Old Testament, the word Nephilim in Genesis 6:4 is translated as gigantos, or giants in English. This version is the only version of the Old Testament which is quoted by all of the apostles, bar none, in the New Testament, so they considered it to be very reliable. In the Hebrew version, the word Nephilim comes from the word Nephi and has two possible meanings. One, to fall upon, or two, from the fallen ones. Now perhaps both of these meanings are implied because these giants were the offspring of fallen angels who fell upon their enemies, meaning to conquer them by virtue of their great size and strength. In the Old Testament Hebrew, the term sons of God refers to angels, the B'nai Elohim, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, and the B'nai Elim. Obvious examples are Job 1:6, 2:1, and 38:4. All of these speak of angels. Satan is an angel, a fallen angel, and according to Job, he presented himself before God with the other angels. Genesis 6:2 also makes a distinction between the sons of God and daughters of men. And a few words to those who hold to what is called the Seth Theory, that the sons of God refers to Seth, the son of Adam. In the early 4th century, the Emperor Constantine declared the Roman world to be Christian and started converting pagan temples for Christian use. Now Julian, who was called the apostate, became the Roman emperor in the year 361. He claims to have followed Christian teachings for 12 years, but after this he went on a campaign to re-establish paganism as the main religion of Rome. He considered himself to be a reincarnated form of Alexander the Great. This is the man who influenced Cyril of Alexandria and Julius Africanus to reject the orthodox position and put together this Seth theory. This theory seemed more acceptable to pagan Romans and continued in popularity throughout the Dark Ages or medieval period. The theory has absolutely no basis in Scripture and denies the 45 references to giants in the Bible. So where to begin? Most people in the Western world are well aware of the story of David killing a giant called Goliath from Samuel. This is 1 Samuel 17. Now this giant is said to be 9 foot 9 inches or about 3 meters tall. However, many are not aware of the other giants who were related to Goliath in 2 Samuel 21 verses 15 to 22. In the case of Goliath, we are told the size and weight of his armor and weapons, and these weapons are described in a similar way for the giants in 2 Samuel. One of the giants is also described as having 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. Now, what is obvious from this text is that these men were different to other people living at that time. Their sheer height and strength, for example, the weight of their armor, which no normal human being could carry, are given as evidence of their physical abnormalities, and they are an evidence in Scripture that they were different. Also, in this text, we are introduced to the name Rafar, a name that is very important to this study. This is in Samuel. All of these giants were said to be descendants of Rafar, or the Raphaites. This name is mentioned as one of the sons of Benjamin. This is one of the initial tribes of Israel and Jacob's son in 1 Corinthians 8 verse 2. But in the earlier listing in Genesis 46:21, he does not exist. He is not mentioned at all. Now, this is a strange anomaly in the Bible, but as we shall see, immediately after the flood there were no giants mentioned to be in the land of Canaan. The implication is that Satan heard God's promise to Abraham in Genesis 15:13. He knew that he had 400 years to prepare a race in Canaan to stop the Jews ever getting there, and therefore to stop the coming of the Messiah, God's prophecy and promise. Is it likely that one of Benjamin's sons was the father of a race of giants? Do humans suddenly begin producing giants? The answer is obviously no. Post-flood giants have two common sources, the sons of Anak and the Rephaim. Obviously then, the word Rafar is the root of Rephaim and the Rephaites. The picture gets even clearer when we study the creature killed under Moses' command, a very famous king called Og. Before the conquest under Joshua, the Israelites had several battles. One famous one, which the prostitute Rahab mentions, concerns, to quote Genesis 6, a man of renown, a hero of old. Rahab tells the spies, this is in Joshua 2:10, that she has heard how the Israelites completely destroyed the Amorite kings Sihon and Og. Deuteronomy 3:11 tells us, only Og, king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaites. His bed was made of iron and was more than 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. That is about 3.5 by 2 meters. It is still in Rabbah of the Anakites. Now forgive me for stating the obvious, but why would you bother to mention a man's bed unless there was something very unusual about it? And why would you bother to keep it? Og was different, and as we shall see, so were a lot of others. The International Standard Bible Encyclopedia offers the following references of giant races who descended from the Rephaites. The word translated Rephaite in 1 Chronicles 24 is Yaldi ha-Rafar, literally sons of the giant, and is a reference to the 4 killed which I mentioned earlier in 2 Samuel. Other giant races include the Amorites and Anakites, as in Deuteronomy 2 verses 10 and 11, which states, the Amorites used to live there, a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. Like the Anakites, they were considered Rephaites. We also have the Ammonites in Deuteronomy 2:20, who were given the same description. Rephaim is also known as the place of the spirits or place of the demons, so this tribal name also has very close connections with the demonic, something that we will discuss even more in the third video. And what of the sons of Anak, known as the Anakites and the Anakim? Deuteronomy 2:11 states that they were considered to be Rephaites. Their name is mentioned in Numbers 13:33. They are the ancestors of the Nephilim and the very giants who were in the land when Moses and the Jews arrived at the banks of the Jordan River. Anak is the son of Abba. This is Joshua 15:13. Abba has a city named after him and is said to be the greatest of the Anakim, the Anakites, in Joshua 14:15. However, like the rest of the Rephaim, he has no recorded roots. He is not listed as a descendant of Noah. We are given a list of the tribes in Genesis 10, including the inhabitants of Canaan, but the Anakites and Rephaim are not mentioned. Indeed, they don't seem to exist until after Abraham. Now, if these are merely tall humans, then where is their human ancestry recorded? It is not recorded because they have no male ancestry. They are the progeny of human women and angels who transformed into males who could impregnate them. In Genesis 15:13, God prophesies to Abraham that his descendants would be slaves in a foreign land for 400 years and then brought to Canaan. At some time during this period, the Anakites appear. They take over Canaan and they fortify the cities. Abraham had already fought the kings of Canaan with his 318 men and conquered them, and there is no mention of giants in any of those battles. But this does not mean that there were no giants prior to Abraham whose descendants also gathered in and around Canaan. For example, we have the Amorites. This tribe go way back to before the time of Abraham, to about the 22nd century BC and the Sumerian empires of Ur. They are mentioned in every ancient text, Egyptian, and Sumerian Babylonian, for example, as a fierce warrior people from whom others built walls just to keep them out. That is, walls up to 170 miles long. However, no ancient text states categorically that they were giants or taller than other people. That comes later. Their roots go back to Noah's son Ham, the same son who was cursed by his father for the incident about Noah being naked. The Bible also states that some of them were giants, but only after Moses encounters them. This is the only place where giants have a human ancestry, the ancestor being Canaan, but only tribes are mentioned rather than a proper single human lineage. Amos chapter 2 and verse 9 exaggerates their size, saying, I destroyed the Amorite before them, though he was as tall as cedars and strong as the oaks. Another fascinating reference to them is in Genesis 15:16. Abraham has just finished fighting the kings of Sodom and is in this region. The Lord puts him into a dream and tells him that his descendants will be slaves in a foreign country for 400 years and afterwards come back to Canaan. And then we have this strange verse. In the fourth generation your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. What sin is the Lord speaking of? It is certainly not about the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, as Abraham has already witnessed their destruction. Remember Sihon, the king who helped mighty Og. He was the king of the Amorites, a king closely allied to the Rephaim. I realize that I am speculating at this point. However, I solemnly believe that Satan tried to stop God's promise to Abraham because he knew without doubt that from Abraham all generations will be blessed. Satan tried to corrupt the whole of humanity before the flood, and he was very nearly successful. Only 8 people survived the flood, and Enoch was taken away. But here, he is given 400 years to prepare for the children of God coming back to Canaan. There is no doubt in my mind that Scripture testifies to the fact that there were many tribes of giants in Canaan at the time Moses arrived with the people. The only giants associated with human ancestry are also the only tribes in which the strange verse about sins reaching their full measure. Were the Amorites a tribe of human ancestry who willingly participated in Satan's plan? We don't know the answer to this question. But the reference in Amos 2 surely exaggerates their size, but the meaning is clear. They were much taller and stronger than other people, a people associated with cedar and oak trees. The Old Testament does not just have a couple of stories about giants such as Goliath. There are dozens of verses referring to entire tribes of people of great size and strength, as in Canaan, and if we are to be true to Scripture, we cannot simply ignore references. Genesis 6:4 tells us that the Nephilim, that is the giants, were in the land in those days, the flood, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. I want you to take particular notice that the words "and also afterwards," meaning after the flood, it says that the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. The word order of the verse states that this procreation of fallen angels and human women occurred both before and after the flood. In the next video, I will be examining the dozens of references to giants in other cultures, and especially the practices and atrocities performed by those who were under the authority and demonic influence of these creatures. There is a huge amount of evidence of their existence, and the depth of depravity in their practices may shock you. However, if we do not understand these things, we can never give a reasoned argument for why God ordered the genocide of all but 8 people at the time of the global flood, or of the specific tribes and races in the land of Canaan who were under Joshua's command. Please remember to like and subscribe to this video if it has been informative for you, and I look forward to your comments below. God bless.